3 or 4 years ago, I astonished friends and colleagues by cutting back on a lot of the community writing work that I did in schools and prisons and other organisations. And although I love teaching, I wanted to develop a series of novels of my own called The Winston Tales. The spelling is Tails. And from the viewpoint of a family dog, we see how 4 young people deal with big change in their lives and their family. The dog is in the municipal kennels and is in danger of being put to sleep by somebody who he calls Psychovet. All you need to know before I read is in the next kennel is an Alsatian that he calls Her Hoightiness, who looks down upon him because he's a mongrel. But there's more to her than that. And that he has this ability to look at human beings and see colours around them. And some colours are good and some colours are bad. And that's the way in which he reads emotion. And this chapter here is called Love at First Sight. And so, for the very reason that I'd stopped looking up at the few humans that passed my cage, I sensed the one that I'm now going to tell you about before I actually saw her. To be precise, I was lying on the concrete with my lower jaw on my outstretched legs, my eyes half closed against the grassed square that was framed by the 4 terraces of caging that made up the kennels. First off, I felt a rise in temperature that I put down to the sun getting even stronger than it had been all morning. Then I was aware of redness, as if a mist of that colour had been sprayed into the air. Sometimes this means anger, but mostly it means joy. And you can tell the difference right away. Because where anger makes your coat bristle, a joyful red gets your tail wagging like it's got a mind of its own. So because the increase in temperature and appearance of red was accompanied by my baldy tail going like a lizard on scalding concrete, I looked up. My sore blue eyes, that had conjunctivitis linked to my mange, becoming as wide as moons even before I met the gaze of a smiling, ginger-haired woman who was about 55, and who had a big broken nose that made me want to shoot my tongue out and lick her face, as if this could compensate for the pain that she must have helped when the injury occurred. "Aren't you an artful one?" she exclaimed, taking me aback, because as far as I knew, I was just being myself, which wasn't especially artful, though after she'd said it, the red around her got richer, showing artful was probably just her playful way with words. "Aren't you an artful one?" she repeated, bending so close that I saw my most quizzical, pricked-ear look twice reflected in her big green eyes. Yes, you are, as artful as they come," she cooed. Well, artful or not, I have to admit, if that wasn't the moment for me to make a highly painful sacrifice by rolling onto my sore back, I didn't know what was. The reason being that there's few things dog-loving humans enjoy more than a belly that's offered for tickling. And since you must be wondering about the impediment of my cage, the fact was I saw it as an advantage, as my sudden admirer would have to crouch to put her fingers through, thereby getting real close to my cause. Yet as I went on to my back and got an upside-down view of her thin but smiley lips, battered nose, and eyes that I now realise were as loving as they were honest, what did she do but straighten up and step back, sending fear of yet more rejection through me like an electric shock that I already knew about on account of my first human having a cruel streak as wide as a river, which in fact was how my mange came, the horribleness of electric shocks that only stopped when the RSPCA took me away from him. Anyway, keeping very still so as not to make Ginger, as I'd already dubbed her, withdraw any further, I fought the need to blink, convinced that my life depended upon unbroken contact between her eyes and my blue moons that had now gone so wide my conjunctivitis was really stinging. Artful, she said, only this time with a thoughtful softness that suggested I was being considered as her companion, and that got me thinking she was probably a spinster, and if I could just avoid blinking until she got herself fully committed, I'd have the life of Riley, whoever he was. Then, beyond her legs, that had slacks the same pea-green colour as her blouse, I noticed tatty sandals and unpolished brogues, realising she stepped back because she wanted some kids to get a good look at me, putting me into such a tiz that I was off my back and panting hard as I padded round and round, an overreaction resulting from a horror that the stress of everything had got me seeing doubles, or even apparitions. But in fact, The gobsmacking similarity of appearances that briefly got me so agitated was down to Ginger's kids being two quirky-looking sets of boy-girl twins. Jack and Vanessa, who were 16, and Craig and Rachel, who were 15, all of them having a thick mop of black hair that clearly came from their dad's side of the family. Because otherwise, they were Ginger to a T. Skinny lips, a Roman nose, and a chin that was as pointy as a wedge of cheese, except that obviously it was all times 4, and so created an extreme encounter of dead striking visuals. Especially when you consider that as well as being as green, wide and honest like their mums, their 8 shiny, expectant eyes were glued on me. Like any second, they'd realise I was a repulsive freak and move on to a dog with its full coat of fur. Except that those same young eyes were enchanting, heart-melting and loving like I'd never seen in humans before. Happy, sad eyes with needs of their own that had me hurtling into a tunnel that I knew I'd never come out of, even if I was rejected, as I was already willing to forgive them for, because that's how love at first sight got me. So perhaps you could have said I encountered an apparition of sorts after all, one that filled me with a golden warmth and an iron resolve to elude psychovet so I could live and love with all my power. Compelled by these exciting new feelings, I shoved my right paw through the bars of my cage and started what the kids and Ginger would have called whimpering, where in fact it was laughter that brought about my embarrassing seal wiggle that's always made me suspect I've got Labrador mixed in with my collie crossness. Because if the cheese-wedged chins, big noses and yearning green eyes weren't startling enough, I was staggered by my darling kid's ensemble of thick and expressive black eyebrows. Eyebrows that resembled long, furry caterpillars whose life force was beautiful emotion, if that makes sense to you, without making me as wet as a husky in a thaw. The dog has a second sight, and through that second sight we enter in the minds of each of the characters and see how, through their mum enabling them to draw upon their unique creativity, they survive the terrible thing that's happened to their dad, who's obviously missing from the family when they go to the kennels. The dog's a character, and in real life and in writing, in any situation, characters need conflict, something to work against, something to survive. And to come back to the point of simplicity that I made at the beginning, I've worked in schools where kids have said to me, I can't do it, I'm autistic. I can't do it, I can't spell. I can't do it, I'm not neat enough. I can't do it, I'm not clever enough. And my reply is always, none of that matters. None of that stuff matters. The patterns of the words on the page or in your mind, if you get it backwards or sideways or the wrong way around or you can't do it, it doesn't matter. What counts is if you can speak, you can think, and if you can think, you can write. And that comes back to what my old friend John Silkin said about simplicity. We're going for simplicity. We're going for clarity, to be clear. That's what I promised that I come into your school.